Jai Hind. In our first session of this particular lecture, in week 3rd, we have explored the foundational philosophical concepts underpinning Vedic and Upanishadic thinking on conflict and harmony, that is, Rit and Dharma, as cosmic and ethical principles. Ahimsa's active commitment to welfare and practical mechanism for conflict prevention and resolution through Satya, Samvad, Nyaya and Shama. Today, we deepen this exploration by examining how these principles evolved and their contemporary relevance to defense studies We will trace the sophistication of Vedic governance mechanism, Rasya and Vajpayee, the Upanishadic revolution that shifted from external rituals to internal realization, the philosophical roots of conflict through Chitvrit, just war principles, and universal concepts like Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. The session, in this second session, uh, this second session shifts from answering why conflict happens and how to prevent it to how philosophical transformation, ethical governance, and universal ethics create lasting peace. Ancient Indian thinkers were not dreamers but pragmatic strategists who recognized that sustainable peace requires addressing psychological and philosophical roots, not merely managing military symptoms. Let's begin with the sophisticated governance innovations of Vedic India and trace how these principles evolved into profound philosophical insights that remain striking relevant to your work in defense and studies and also in the understanding of peace and conflict studies. Now we shift to Upanishads, which represent philosophical deepening and internal focus. So let's start from the historical context. The Upanishad emerged around 800 to 500 BC, centuries after the core Vedic period. By this time, India had achieved agricultural stability, urbanization, and complex societies. This stability allowed philosophical speculation to deepen. The focus shifted from rituals maintaining cosmic order to understanding the nature of reality and consciousness. Then there was an inward spiritual understanding of this thing, where the Vedas emphasized proper ritual actions, yajna or yajna. The Upanishads emphasized proper understanding. There was a key shift to it. The sacrifice that matters most is internal. The sacrifice of ignorance, ego, and limited perspective. The Upanishadic sage is not primarily concerned with performing rituals flawlessly. He is concerned with realizing truth, understanding the nature of Atman, that is self, and Brahman, that is ultimate reality. The central Upanishadic insight is that the individual self, that is Atman, is ultimately non-different from Brahman, the universal consciousness underlying all existence. If this is true, how can conflict be justified if everyone is ultimately expression of the same universal consciousness? Violence against another is violence against oneself. The realization is transformative. It transcends egoic conflict rooted in separation, fear, and competition. There is application of this to conflict. That is, understanding Atman and Brahman unity does not make one pacifist in the crude sense. Rather, it reorients. It reorients motivation. Action taken from this understanding aims to restoring dharma, not satisfying ego of warrior who understand who understand the Atma Brahman unity, fights to protect dharma, not from hatred or desire for conquest. Let's move forward and try to understand the root cause of conflict, that is Chitvrit. The Upanishad and the subsequent Indian philosophy identified psychological roots of conflict. Let's examine them. There's 5 Chitvrit, that is mental disturbances. Chitvrit means mental disturbance or movements of minds. These are mental patterns that perpetuate suffering and conflicts. Avidya ignorance, avidya. Avidya means ignorance, specifically of one's true nature and fundamental reality. Avidya is a is the failure to understand that all beings are expression of one consciousness. This ignorance enables us to harm others while justifying ourselves. Avidya can be it manifests as, first is not understanding consequences of our action. Second is misinterpreting others' intention. Third is failing to recognize universal ethical principles. Fourth is believing ourselves fundamentally separate from others. Addressing avidya through education, philosophical understanding, and direct experience is crucial for conflict prevention. Second is asmita, ego. Asmita is ego identification, the false sense that we are separate, isolated selves competing against others. Asmita drives territorialism, status competition, defensive reactions to perceived sides, dominance seeking behavior. Most conflict involve protagonists strongly identified with limited selves, their nation, tribe, religion, ideology, viewing other as a outsider or threat. Next is rag dvesh, attachment and aversions. These operate together. Rag, that is craving for pleasurable things. Dvesh, aversions from painful things. Together they create conflict. Attachment to territory triggers defensive wars. Aversions to another group triggers primitive conflict. Attachment to wealth triggers exploitation. Aversions to change triggers rigidity and violence. These psychological roots are universal. They are not unique to any culture or group. Let's move forward and then let's try to understand the Vedic wisdom for governance. That is Rajan's role or king's role. Understanding psychological roots help us appreciate why the ruler's role is so critical. Protector of dharma. These rulers are called as protector of dharma. Their fundamental duty is protecting and upholding dharma, universal ethical principle and societal order. This is not about the ruler's personal welfare or even national interest. National interest narrowly conceived. It's about maintaining cosmic and social order. A ruler protecting dharma, that is upholds truthfulness and honesty, ensures justice is fair and impartial, protect the weak and vulnerable, makes decisions align with the universal principle. Justice delivery, the ruler must establish judicial system that provide fair hearing to all, apply law impartially, protecting property and life, allow for appeal and coercion. Unjust judicial system don't achieve stability. They create resentment that eventually erupts in conflict. Conflict arbiter, that is the ruler resolves dispute between subjects through principles of nyaya, that is justice and shama, forgiveness, not through power alone. This role requires wisdom, impartiality and deep understanding of dharmic principles. A ruler who arbitrates conflict wisely gains legitimacy and stability. One who favors the powerful and ignores the weak faces inevitable unrest. Let's understand the just war principles. We have discussed peace extensively, but what about war? The Vedic tradition developed sophisticated just war principles. When war becomes necessary, Vedic thought did not romanticize war, but it acknowledged that sometimes force is necessary to protect dharma. War is justified only when just cause exists. Just cause exists. War defends dharma, protects the innocent, or redresses serious wrongs. Another means exhausted, dialogue, negotiation, non-violent solution have been genuinely attempted. There was also talk of the last resort. Force is used only when alternatives have failed. Prohibitions during warfare is also one of the components. Even in justified wars, strict ethical guidelines apply. that is, no cruelty, torture, and unnecessary suffering prohibited. Protect non-combatants, civilians, and the wounded and the elderly are off limits. No prohibited weapons. Weapons that cause indiscriminate or disproportionate suffering prohibited. Compassion for enemies. Most striking, even enemies are entitled to compassion. The wounded are treated medically regardless of uh, allegiances. The defeated are not enslaved or exterminated. Negotiation for peace continue even during warfare. This recognizes that today's enemy might be tomorrow's ally. Vindictiveness perpetuates cycles of retaliation. There is a contemporary relevance to all these thoughts also. These just war principles parallel international humanitarian law and the Geneva Conventions. Ancient India had recognized these principles millennia earlier. For the defense professionals, this suggests that ethical constraints on warfare are not merely modern Western imposition. They reflect ancient universal principles. The next slide is one of the interesting one which I found is also the representation of India and its understanding toward the world. That is Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. Universe is a family. We conclude our philosophical survey with perhaps the most profound Upanishadic vision. The world is one family. Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, a phrase from the Maha Upanishad, encapsulate the height of Indian philosophical version. It asserts the entire world is one family, all being despite differences in nationality, ethnicity, religion or ideology are fundamentally related. This is not naive universalism. It's grounded in Atman and Brahman philosophy. If all being shares our same ultimate consciousness, then harming any being harms oneself. Practically, it suggests national interest should not override universal welfare. Second is conflict should be resolved to benefit humanity overall, not just one nation. Next is long-term stability requires considering impact on all people. Ethical principles are universal, not culturally relative. For modern policy makers or for modern policy, Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam does not eliminate conflict of interest. Nations still have legitimate interest, but it frames these within a larger context, shared humanity and cosmic interconnections. A nation pursuing its interest while considering impact on others will find sustainable solution more than one pursuing ruthless national advantage. Let's move forward and discuss. Let's move forward. I'm going to discuss the path to harmony, that is the Chit with Vrit Nirod. How does one transcend the mental disturbance perpetuating conflict? Through Chit with Nirod, cessation of mental disturbances. Nirod here means cessation or dissolution. Chitvrit Nirod is the dissolution of mental disturbances. This is achieved through sustained practice in three domains: yoga and meditation. Yoga practices, including physical posture, breathing, and meditation, calm the mind and develop awareness of underlying consciousness. Regular practitioners report that it reduced reactivity to provocations, clear discernment between impulse and wisdom, greater empathy and compassion, reduced identification with ego. These psychological challenges make individuals more capable of resolving conflicts wisely. Adherence to dharma, that is legally, ethically, truthfully, compassionately, selflessly, gradually transforms psychology. When one consistently acts from dharmic principle rather than ego, the mind gradually identifies less with the separate self and more with the universal. This creates psychological peace and also reduces conflict. Cultivation of Satya, Ahimsa and Karuna basically uh, means that Satya, the truthfulness, breaks patterns of self-deception and dishonest dealing. Ahimsa, non-violence, redirects aggressive impulsive toward constructive purpose. Karuna, compassion, opens the heart and reduces defensiveness. Together, these practices rewire psychology away from conflict patterns. In this slide, you are seeing the Shanti mantra. Let's conclude with one of the most beautiful expression in the Vedic corpus, the Shanti mantra, Yajurveda. I'll recite it first. May there be peace in the heavens, peace in the sky, peace on the earth, peace in the waters, peace in the plants, peace in the trees, peace everywhere. What this means? The mantra invokes peace across all dimensions. Heavens, peace among celestial beings and cosmic principle. Sky, atmosphere, peace in conditions affecting life. Earth, peace among terrestrial beings. Water, peace in aquatic realm. Plant, peace in the vegetable kingdom. Trees, peace in forest and nature. Everywhere, comprehensive peace encompassing all existence. The vision is that this month expresses the comprehensive vision of Indian philosophy. Peace is not merely absence of human warfare. It's harmony across all dimensions of existence. A world with human peace but environmental destruction isn't truly peaceful. A world at peace among nations but tormented internally by psychological conflict is not truly peaceful. The Shanti mantra envisions peace as psychological peace, that is inward calm; social peace, the harmonious relations; the political peace, that is just governance; ecological peace, that is sustainable harmony with nature; the cosmic peace, alignment with universal principles. Now you may ask this, what is the practical application of this thing? For conflict resolution and peace studies, this suggests sustainable peace require addressing issues holistically. Psychological, social, political, and environmental dimensions, simultaneously ignoring any dimensions leaves vulnerabilities for future conflict. Let's move forward and we'll discuss the uh, contemporary relevance. How do ancient ideas speak to modern challenges? Holistic conflict. Post-traumatic stress, underlying resentment, psychological wounds, and unheld historical grievances perpetuate conflict even after active warfare ceases. The Upanishadic framework suggests that addressing these psychological roots through education, reconciliation, and psychological healing, not merely military solutions. Ethical framework for governance also suggests that in our era of real politics and power politics, Vedic principles offer an alternative. That alternative is governance guided by dharmic principles rather than mere power pursuit. A governance framework emphasizing justice, transparency, and universal welfare creates more stable societies than one based on coercion and on power monopoly. Nations and leaders that exercise power with ethical constraints gain legitimacy and stability. Nonviolence and compassion for peace building, modern peace building, increasingly recognize that sustainable peace requires compassion, genuine understanding of the other's suffering, and perspective. Adversarial approaches that view conflict as zero sum often perpetuate cycles. Approaches emphasizing dialogue, empathy, and win win solution derived from principles like Samvad, Karuna, and Shama prove more sustainable. What are the key takeaways with these two lectures of this week? Let me synthesize our learning into four key takeaways. First, conflict is rooted in deviation from dharma and rith. When individuals, institutions, or nations abandon ethical principle and cosmic order, conflict emerges as natural consequences, not as punishment, but as the inevitable outcome of disorder. Implication is conflict prevention require re-establishing alignment with dharmic principle, not merely military deterrence. Second key takeaway is prevention operates through Satya, Ahimsa and Dharma adherence, truthful communication, commitment to non-violence, and conscious fulfillment of ethical duties create conditions where conflicts become less likely. These are not naive idealism; they are pragmatic recognition that trust-based relationships are more stable than suspicion-based ones. The third key takeaway is resolution via dialogue, justice, compassion, and forgiveness. When conflicts do arise, samvad, dialogue helps parties understand root cause. Nyay ens- ensures fair treatment. Karuna, that is compassion, enables empathy. Shama, forgiveness, breaks cycles of revenge. Sustainable peace requires all these elements working together. Another and the last key takeaway is that the ruler's role as a protector of dharma and justice. Governance is structure that uphold dharmic principle, ensure justice, and protect the vulnerable vulnerables, create stable societies. Conversely, corrupt, oppressive, or negligent governance perpetuates conflict. We end where we begin: Shanti, peace, harmony, and cosmic order. The Vedic and Upanishadic tradition offers us not a naive pacifism but a sophisticated, holistic version of peace grounded in understanding cosmic principle, psychological transformation, and ethical governance. These ideas don't eliminate conflict, but they provide framework for preventing necessary conflict, resolving inevitable conflict justly, and building governance structure that promote lasting peace. In our contemporary world of military budget exceeding social welfare spending, of conflicts perpetuated by unhealed historical wounds of nation pursuing narrow interest while ignoring global consequences, these ancient ideas offer wisdom. They suggest that sustainable peace require psychological transformation, addressing root cause, not just symptoms, ethical governance, justice, transparency, accountability, dialogue and understanding, that is genuine engagement with the others, universal perspective, recognizing shared humanity and interconnections, long-term vision, building institutions that sustain peace across generation. As you pursue your career in defense and strategic studies, in peace and conflict studies, remember the greatest strategists are not those who win the wars. They are those who prevent unnecessary conflict, and when conflicts proves inevitable, resolve them in ways that build lasting peace. That's the wisdom of Vedic and Upanishadic thought. I rest today's lecture and my argument here with the keyword Shanti. Thank you.